Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 5 o'clock, Wednesday, May 2nd. The Committee on Education, Finance, Taxation now convenes this public hearing. The public hearing notices were given to the media on Monday, April 23rd, second notice on Friday, April 27th, and for the record, today is Wednesday, May 2nd, and the time now is 5 o'clock p.m. The committee will hear and accept testimony, both oral and written, on the following. This is a GDOE oversight hearing. And the areas of our concern tonight is the bullying, the drugs, the weapons, basically all the events that deals with the safety of our students, of the children of Guam that attend DOE. I'd like to acknowledge the senators, my colleagues that are present with me. I have Vice Speaker Senator Therese Cherlai and Senator Mike Nicholas. The general rules for this oversight hearing. The conduct of this public hearing shall be as follows. Those testifying will be recognized in the order to sign up, but the folks that are sitting currently are the folks that would be answering pretty much all the questions. Okay? Written testimony may be read. Lengthy written testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes, but will allow the extended period that the superintendent may need or the chairman. Please provide our legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony shall be confined to the substance. We're here for safety of our children. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name. One of the things, Mr. Superintendent, I wanted to address is that I'm gonna just read off my list of what's been hitting the news. And there's probably more events that have been happening that haven't reached the news. But we'll start down with September 25th, 2017, you had a lockdown to possible gunshots at Ukidu. September 29th, you had also a lockdown at Sanchez due to bullets found in restroom. On November 28th, you had a canine sweep, suspected drugs found at Southern High. Also in Southern High, you had a lockdown due to social media threats. February 6th, Tijan High School fight. 3 students were battling it out, okay? Also in Tijan on February 6th, students gets body slammed. That was viral on the social media. February 7th, you had a lockdown at Inaran due to bullets found on campus. February 22nd, Tijan High School fight. Students sustained several blows on the head. That sounds bad. March 6th, Southern High School, students arrested for assaulting 2 students. April 17th, Simon Sanchez High School fight. Students bullies bystander and then breaks several windows. And that was on the news. April 18th, Southern High School, high on spice. 2 males lying on ground struggling. April 18th, also in Southern High, 2 females disoriented. May 2nd, just today, Untalan was locked down because bullets was found on campus. Mr. Superintendent, I have several questions. I'll just go ahead and read it all out, and then the panel, the superintendent, his staff, and the board can hopefully provide all general answers to them. I have number 1, what is the current policy on electronic use from students? How do we help protect our students' identity and crisis they may find themselves in? What efforts are in place to prevent the onset of misinformation when one side of stories are being told via footage or recordings? Are all schools actively intervening with attendance issues? That's one of the issues that we've had with the truancy. Are protocols being followed to help the students come to school and receive adequate education? If not, each school needs to partner with a student's family, caregivers, or any other legal guardian to help the student rather than force third-party intervention, such as truant officers, courts, and social services, that further keeps the students from returning to school. One-to-one aides and all staff and professionals fully and regularly trained and assessed to ensure that the student is in adequate care with a trusted and experienced educational individual, and how often is GDOE performing background checks? Are there policies in place to help staff, faculty, and administration keep track of the whereabouts of employees while on campus? For example, during breaks, where are the employees? Are the employees signing in and out of campus? Is the principal knowledgeable of the ongoing on his or her campus. Why, when, and why are students being left alone with a staff member while on campus? I don't need to refer to the incident with the one-to-one school aide, okay, that there was an arrest. Where are the regulatory bodies, and why isn't everybody working together to prevent scrutiny or devastating incidents? Is each school being held accountable for funds raised for special events or organization? That's talking about your non-appropriate fund. Is the schools prepared to deal with emergency on their campus? When you do the lockdown, what are the programs in place, okay, and the policies? What other precautions are being made to prevent bullying, active shooters, suicide, drugs, tobacco, alcohol, sexual misconduct, students' disrespect to staff? What is being done for better family factors, such as maybe the lack of parent involvement? And I honestly believe that that may be one of the issues going on. But Mr. Superintendent, if you could please tell the people of Guam, tell us, what is going on in the schools and what needs to be done, or what's being done, and how we may be able to help you protect our students, prevent the activities that are going on that are not favorable to our students and the people of Guam. Thank you, sir.
Sir, may I first yield to our board chair for his brief statement, and then I'll follow.
Malaka? Okay. Okay. Hafidades and buenas. Honorable Mr. Rosia. Agradece esta oportunidad. Hafidades, Senator San Agustin. I appreciate the opportunity for the Guam Board of Education to testify today and to support the Guam Department of Education's efforts to educate our children and to keep them safe. The oversight hearing called today is to address the issues of bullying, drugs, and weapons. I appreciate the attention to these issues and look forward to your support of the department in addressing them. As a former Guam Education Board member and chairman, you are intimately familiar with the policies and procedures that GDOE has in place to address issues of bullying, drugs, and weapons. A number of these policies were in place when you were on the board, and many of them have been updated since then. Our board recently passed two important board policies, Board Policy 409 and 901, addressing issues pertaining to bullying and harassment involving students as well as employees. Our role is to strengthen the policies and to ensure that the superintendent and our school leaders have the necessary guidance and support to protect our schools. The superintendent strengthens these policies even further through more detailed standard operating procedures that form the basis of assisting our administrators in the day-to-day operational responsibility. The truth of the matter is this, sir. Despite the policies, procedures, and preparation of our school leaders and employees, we will not fully prevent issues arising on campus due to student or employee misconduct. To do so will really be unrealistic. We watch the news closely. For every story you read about a school fight, drugs on campus, assault, or harassment, you will see 10 times over the stories about drugs in our community, violence in our villages, and other negative forces that we all have a responsibility to address. Having said that, I can assure you, because of our focus and preparation, our schools are better equipped to handle our responsibility to keep our 30,000 students safe, to ensure they are fed daily, to offer them support of nurses and counselors as needed, and to educate them so that they can leave negative influences behind in search of a positive outcome for them and their families. We have been out in the community to address concerns raised by parents and other stakeholders. And despite our efforts, we let them know that we are doing our best to serve them and their children. However, we need the necessary resources to do our job. We need funding to provide full-time support staff to help with supervision and to assist our most vulnerable students. We need funding to build out our school resource officer program so that we can man all schools. We need funding to expand our school-based behavioral services so that we can tackle substance abuse, bullying, and violent behavior. We need funding to harden our schools and secure them from intruders. There is something else that we need as part of the solution. We need our parents. When we deal with students who face the most disciplinary challenges, who need intervention and redirection in order to behave and stay in school, the support and involvement parent is essential. We need their help. And when their child is presenting our school community with issues related to drugs or violence or bullying, parents need to take the responsibility just as we are required to do so. We all need to be held accountable, but this includes our parents and our guardians at home. You are holding an oversight, and I assume to get a better understanding of the challenges we face as we carry out our duties and responsibilities to protect our students. I also hope that it is to ensure that we provide legislative support for the board in our policy ranking role, as well as the resources to support our superintendent and administrators as they bear the weight that the community places on our shoulders. And I just want to quickly, I have my colleagues on the board that are with me here today, and just looking at the enabling legislation, Title 17, regarding the Board of Education, and I just want to read this into the record, that the governance of the Department of Education is vested in the Education Board, to be known as the Guam Education Board, and the board shall be comprised of its 9 members. Further reads in Section 2, that the Guam Education Board shall be responsible for all policies that govern the Department of Education, and the board shall have the authority to delegate such of its powers as they may deem appropriate, but shall retain the ultimate responsibility and for the exercise of its powers. And then if you go down to section, further in the section, it basically says that we're also responsible for setting, establishing student discipline policies. So, Mr. Chairman, the members of the committee, you see our galleries full. We have our administrators here. And I know that these folks are our front line, and they see it. Oftentimes, we've been reading stuff that has actually happened outside of the gate. Outside of the gate. Yet, the Department of Education is required to take some responsibility in that. And we're not shying away from that. But as soon as a child leaves the door, when my child leaves the door to go to the bus stop, he gets on the bus, he's a responsibility of DPW. Once he gets to the school, he enters the gate, he's a responsibility of the Department of Education, also on the way home. And so from the point between my child walking to the bus stop, it's our community. We look out for each other. I used to walk to the bus stop. But, you know, incidences of drugs in our community, you know, I mean, it's prevalent. And with technology and with everything that's out there, it's actually kind of good that maybe the kids are recording it so that we can address the issues. And, you know, in your letter to us, you basically asked us to provide some data and some statistics regarding some of the issues and challenges we're facing, sir. And I just want to point out that the Department of Education is one of the most transparent government agencies. If you actually go on our website, it's there. All the information regarding our data with respect to discipline. And I can point that out. It's so voluminous. There's a lot of paper that's attached and documents attached to our policies. And so, you know, we're here today. I know that this oversight hearing is to look into the challenges and the issues that we're facing, but it's just not the Department of Education, sir. We have the bigger picture that we have to address. And that's getting our community behind our Department of Education and supporting these folks in the front line. Because oftentimes there's only one side of the story that's told because of privacy rights for our employees and our students. But the safety of our children are paramount. When I first came on the board, I believe I met with all the senators, asking them for their support in my confirmation hearing. And in my discussion with Speaker B.J. Cruz, he asked me about the sexual harassment policy and all these other policies that were pending at the time. And I said, sure, let me reassure you that that'll be one of my priorities. And a couple months after I got on board, we were able to pass those policies after it was scrubbed thoroughly. And I got to give it to the leadership of my vice chair, who kind of led that effort. If you look at the way we structured the governing board of education now, we have committees that actually do the work. We meet with the superintendent and his support staff. These are people in the trenches. So that when we craft policy, it's policy that is vetted and is thoroughly thought out by the subject matter experts. Mr. Lohan here is the chairperson of health and safety within our schools. And let me reassure you, sir, that we take our roles very seriously. And I want to extend our appreciation to you because you do send your people to our meetings. You have a staffer that comes in and participates by listening to what the discussion, how the discussion is going. And we welcome any of the senators to come to our work sessions. This is an opportunity where people can really speak freely, and then once we vet the issues, then we present it to the board. But let me reassure you that under our leadership on the board, we want to ensure that all stakeholder input is given before we address any of these policy issues. So for the record, I just want to state that we do have policies in place, and there are administrators here that exercise the administrative powers that they have based on those policies. Of course, the board supervises the superintendent, and we ask the questions just the same way that our elected leaders ask. But our role as board members is to really monitor and to ensure that the department is running efficiently, and that the resources that is entrusted to us is maximized. Every year we come to the legislature and we ask for support. You know, one of your former colleagues, Senator Bob Kalitsky, always drives home this point about the 14 points. Well, we put a dollar figure to that. And every year we come to the budget, and you've done it before, and that's one of the reasons why you told us that you were going to run for office, because you would have to walk across the street when the building was across at DOA to come and lobby for the financial support of the Department of Education. And now I'm in this position. And every time we come forward, I understand the scarce resources within the Department of Education. However, you know, based on the 14 points, and we put the dollar figure into those issues that deals with safety and a lot of the issues that is being addressed with this oversight, oftentimes we're underfunded. And so we as the department have to prioritize what we need to do to carry out our mission. And so I applaud you for calling this oversight, because definitely we want to share the intimate details of what the data is showing. However, you know, I'm personally inviting you. We're going to continue the dialogue with the data that comes in, because it changes. And like you said, today there was just another incident. That data probably haven't been input into the system. But, you know, sir, let me just reassure you and the senators that have taken their time to be here with us here today, that the people behind me, I know that they are guided according to the policies that are put in place. And the communication that we have with the superintendent is not one of an adversarial type of relationship as a board and the superintendent. Rather, how can we collectively come up with solutions to some of the challenges that we're facing within the department? And so as we go on with the testimony, I may jump in here and there with some of the questions, but I just want to say thank you and allow our superintendent to basically go into the weeds of some of the questions that you have raised. And if we're not able to provide the data or the information that you are seeking this evening, you're more than welcome. We will actually point you in the right direction on the website, because you know, Department of Education is trying to save on Xerox copy papers and all that good stuff. So we have a website that has that data.
Thank you for the website, Mr. Mendiola. But I know when I talk to the superintendent and I ask for a copy, I'm not asking you to burn down a tree or cut down a tree.
Absolutely.
You provide me the copy I asked for. Let me worry about the paper, because I budget. But, Ms. Mendiola, you don't have to justify it. Stop where you're at. We're going to move on to Mr. Fernandez. I'm just curious. I see 5 board members. 4. Where are the other 5 at? I know one of them is the mother passed away.
Yes.
Where's the other board members? Are they here? I'm just curious, okay?
Yeah.
But we're okay. Now, Mr. Mendiola, we'll go ahead and move to Mr. Fernandez so we can get to the issue of the oversight. And are all the principals here that the schools were affected by the bullying that happened? Pretty much? They are, Erica? Okay. Okay, why don't we go ahead and we move to Mr. Superintendent. I got you, Mark. We're good. But when I ask for data, just give it to me. Don't let me look for it in the web. Let's work this way.
Can I
Okay.
interject?
Yeah, go ahead.
And I appreciate that, sir. But you know, we're required to do all these things. You know, and it's readily available at any point in time. You can access it. And so, we're here to present. And
Thank you.
some of that data will be there. But I just wanted to make it for the record that, there are requirements for us to do, and we're carrying it out. I'm just making that as a point, that we are carrying out what was required.
Understood. Understood, Mark.
That's why I'm saying we're going to go into the details of the what you've requested.
Right.
And if there's any gaps in that, then we'll definitely present that to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I hope you will indulge me by allowing me to read as much of the testimony that I think you have a copy of before you. I will try not to read every single line, but I mean, there's a lot of information in here, so I'll do my best. Before I do that, I mean, in addition to the board members who are here today, I wanted to recognize our Deputy Superintendent, Erica Cruz, who was here to the far left, and then next to me, our Student Support Services Division Administrator, Mr. Chris Anderson, and together, through the oversight of the school administrators and as well as through the supports provided to the schools and the development of policy and training and so forth, I believe we can answer the questions that will be put before us today. I also want to just acknowledge the administrators in the room, as you mentioned. The reason why we asked these administrators to be here was because they are our front line when it comes to keeping our schools safe. So it's important that they hear the discussion, they hear the suggestions, any criticisms, any ideas, that they be a part of it. They don't have to hear it translated from me, but they can hear it for themselves. And the reason why I also wanted to go through some of this testimony is because I do want to thank the legislature for recording these sessions and allowing it to be viewed. If they're not able to view it, now, if they're interested, we can always point to the recorded hearing so that those who are interested, as you mentioned, the general public wants to know that the schools are safe. This is one way to do it, just to be allowed to at least hear the presentation. So buenas and hafa day, thank you for scheduling this hearing and providing the opportunity for the Department of Education and the Guam Education Board to update you regarding what we are doing to combat behaviors involving bullying, drugs, and weapons throughout our 41 public schools. As I prepare to offer this testimony, I want to first make a very clear statement. The issues that we are about to discuss are not solely school issues. Bullying, drugs, and weapons are issues that face this entire community. This school year, about a dozen incidents were reported in the media, as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, regarding the discovery of bullets on campus, videos of student fights, videos of students who appear under the influence of drugs or alcohol, reports of assault or harassment, and so on. These incidents, I believe I can speak for everyone here, are disturbing to all of us as education officials, but also as members of the community, because they reflect issues that affect our entire island and put our people, especially our young people, at risk. When it comes to our schools, it is primarily our administrators, whom you've seen behind us, our teachers and our staff, who are tasked with preventing these community ills from affecting our schools, or when prevention fails, responding to the incidents in order to protect our children. As I mentioned, our school administrators lead that frontline response. They know through the superintendent and through the board that safety and security are our primary responsibilities on a day-to-day basis. And then the role that the board and superintendent play are to ensure that there are policies, procedures, and supports to assist our administrators in carrying out their duties. Proactively, the department has adopted positive behavioral interventions and supports, as you know, PBIS, as a framework for addressing student behavior and school climate. This is a prevention-based framework to assist schools in maximizing positive academic and behavioral outcomes for students, and it is a district-wide framework. Board Policy 400 and Standard Operating Procedure 1200-18, our Student Conduct Procedural Manual, require all 41 schools to establish expected behaviors, to teach them to all students, and to model correct behavior by all school personnel. Now, as you referenced as I referenced these in our testimony, I do want to say for the record, because I know this has been not a request, but a requirement, that that our policies, our standard operating procedures be made readily available on our website. So I do want for the public to know that if they go to the Guam Education Board website, they will be able to see those policies. Same thing with the Guam Department of Education, to be able to delve into all of our standard operating procedures, which are able to get through from our front page. The framework that we use establishes a systematic and universal method of addressing behavioral infractions. So our student conduct procedural manual addresses how behavior is adjudicated, as well as a series of actions and interventions that are assigned by school administrators. So for instance, bullying, cyberbullying, drug and weapons violations, these are major level 3 violations, which are the most serious offenses, and consistent with Board Policy 405, which covers student suspension and expulsion, may warrant suspension, a mandatory parent meeting, referrals to counselors, and monitoring for first offenses based on our office discipline referral. Repeated violations may result in a discipline advisory council, what we refer to as a DAC hearing that may result in additional suspension days and or expulsion upon approval of the superintendent. As we work with students not only to provide disciplinary consequences, we also try to address some of the underlying issues that drive this behavior. Administrators are supported by guidance from Standard Operating Procedure 1200-23, which is our Student Procedure Assistance Manual, as well as 1200-19, which is our request for psychological services that help to understand the issues that may be triggering behavior and how to secure additional support. So what I want to do now is kind of address the particular areas that you referenced in your oversight hearing notice. The first refers to bullying and cyberbullying, which are governed by Board Policy 409, as mentioned by the Chair, and detailed through Standard Operating Procedure 1200-22. We are very prescriptive in terms of the detailed guidance provided to school administrators on how to define the behaviors and actions required when the behavior has been substantiated. To address these behaviors, we've partnered with the Superior Court of Guam since 2011 to provide DOE schools with the bullying prevention program, OVEAS, and Safe Schools Ambassadors. The OVEAS program is a comprehensive elementary school-wide program designed and evaluated to reduce and prevent bullying problems among school children and to improve peer relations at schools. Safe Schools Ambassadors is a program that empowers leaders from diverse groups and cliques on campus and equips these student leaders with nonviolent communication and intervention skills to stop bullying and violence among their peers. This program has been piloted in select middle and high schools and functions independently but complementing PBIS, peer mediation resolution, positive action, restorative justice, and other school-level initiatives implemented in varying degrees by schools. To ensure that school personnel and students are trained annually on Board Policy 409, as well as the Standard Operating Procedure 1200-22, the department provides training to school administrators, and in turn, the administrators are required to train their school personnel and students. In addition, Board Policy 901 addresses bullying, harassment, and intimidation involving employees and requires annual training for all employees. Through the use of federal funds, we've been able to invest in iSafe Internet online training for teachers. When we talk about cyberbullying, we're really trying to provide assistance, and this particular platform provides modules for teacher certification and provides student access to safety lessons. We also implement Play by the Rules, which provides training for social studies teachers on the use of localized law-related curriculum for 5th graders, 7th graders, and high school students, through which students are encouraged to be responsible, law-abiding citizens. In addition, in 2017, we began our partnership with the Attorney General's Office to use the Lonnie K-12 curriculum, a part of which addresses sexting and cyberbullying behaviors. I included this section because along with bullying and cyberbullying, we begin to see how that impacts another important issue on this island, which is suicide, especially among young people. Protocols governing school response to suicide ideation and attempts are governed by our Standard Operating Procedure 1200-23, and we have encouraged our personnel to attend Safe Talk, Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training, ASSIST training, and Postvention training. Over the last 5 years, approximately 350 school personnel have completed both trainings. To better reach students, the department conducted in 2016-17 a pilot of the Lifelines curriculum, a comprehensive suicide awareness and responsive programs for teens in all secondary schools, and there are 7 middle schools still pending completion. So just a brief commentary on the bullying, cyberbullying. I think everyone's aware of the bullying interventions that have been applied over the recent years. I will just say for the record that cyberbullying is the most recent and emerging trend that I will admit is something that we continue to try to improve our ability to address. So I think with the onset of technology, one of the issues you raised our board policies do allow for the use of electronic devices on campus, but even if they weren't, we would still deal with issues related to cyberbullying, because a lot of this stuff sometimes just comes from off campus, things that go on maybe 24 hours a day between students using social media or other, well, mostly through social media. And that's something that I know that as school administrators, we try to figure out, how we continue to improve, solutions to address those issues. So that's something that I would just comment as an emerging area that we would definitely need to continue to want to improve on. Drugs and alcohol on campus are a serious concern, and there are, of course, various ways in which we capture this issue on campus. You referenced a couple of them. So we talk about intoxication. There is the use and possession of drugs on campus. Intoxication can be something done off campus, but when you arrive, intoxicated, there are issues that need to be dealt with and addressed for those students. Use and possession of inhalants, use and possession of alcohol, use and possession of tobacco and nicotine delivery devices, and use and possession of, well, that's redundant, of alcohol. But these behaviors are addressed. We have board policies 420, 421, 430, covering the various different substances, as well as a standard operating procedure to go along with that. So, I think that's, pardon me. I think it reflects the broader community approach to drugs and alcohol by creating or prohibiting their use. But the other thing that we've done in recent years, and I talk about next, is we understand drug use among youth can be symptomatic of other social or emotional challenges in their lives. So very recently, we've established a school-based behavioral health program that provides mental health services for children and adolescents with emotional and behavioral health challenges in all 41 schools. These areas include substance abuse, depression, anxiety, and other disorders. This initiative is made up of clinical practices in areas of assessment, diagnosis and prognosis, treatment planning, and counseling. Treatment service includes therapy sessions for individuals and groups. Right now, this initiative is comprised of a clinical team of 3 psychologists and 4 clinical interns who are master level school counselors, and led by one of the psychologists who functions as a clinical director. One of the components is the substance abuse intervention program, which we offer to all middle and high schools, providing substance abuse group therapy to students who have been adjudicated for offenses involving drugs, alcohol, and inhalants. There are 2 tracks: students who've served their consequences but are already in need of services, or otherwise we leverage the suspension to divert students into this program. So there is a curriculum. My testimony goes into the curriculum used for this program, and the amount of time and the number of lessons that are required in order for the students to complete. Over 110 students have completed this cycle since the program's inception in the spring of 2017. Before I move on from there, I just want to say that this is something that we did internally and basically within our current resources. And so I think when it comes down to looking forward, it is something that we're looking to build around, because we know that there is a big demand for school-based behavioral health services, and we're doing. I'm really proud of the team that's jumped in to do this. Again, without additional resources, they said they were willing to move forward, but it is something that we don't want to lose momentum around, and so I just want to point that out. We do work with the Attorney General's office and the police department and Judiciary of Guam to fast-track the process to ensure that drug alcohol violations are expedited, because we all know, I think you're familiar with the fact that there is a juvenile drug court over at the courts that I really support their efforts. That is an intensive program involving the students and families who have been caught for violating our drug laws. And I've seen students progress through that program and complete that program. And I think our effort is really to ensure that when we know that there are students who would benefit from the drug court program, to find a way to make sure they're able to take advantage of those services right away. So that is a partnership that we also are very supportive of and promote, and very happy to have the support of the Guam Chamber of Commerce as part of that. So again, one of those areas where we look at rehabilitation, not just the consequences of suspension or other types of punitive approaches, but also trying to ensure that, as we do with our broader community, find a rehabilitative path for our young people, especially because they're so young, try to get them on track so that they don't have these issues affecting them later in life. Relevant to the drug and alcohol, we do have policies that govern search and seizure. Obviously, something that our legal counsel is very, and our lawyers, of course, have to weigh in on in developing that policy. And also, you may have heard of some of the canine searches that we've been doing in partnership with Customs and Quarantine, just to do a preventative measure and try to discourage anyone thinking of bringing drugs on campus. Tobacco and nicotine are also an issue. And I think everybody's aware that vaping is now, you move from cigarettes to the vape, and now we're trying to make sure that all of our policies and procedures reflect this change. So, right now, we do find, possession of tobacco and nicotine on campus. We typically will confiscate the contraband, and then we are requiring for many of them participation in the brief tobacco intervention program. So that's another intervention program in our schools that provides counseling and education to offenders in the hope of avoiding future issues. So I'll move on to the more serious section on weapons. Of course, weapons are a direct affront to student safety. Board Policy 471 and 425 guide us in how we address behavior involving firearms. If a student uses or possesses a weapon on campus that is a firearm, he or she is expelled for a minimum of 1 year. And this is in addition to any actions that are taken independently by the police department. We know there are a threat of weapons and violence on campus, and it's our job to keep our environment safe. But we need the help of our students, and so we are very supportive, and you put forth a standard operating procedure to require the establishment of school Crime Stoppers programs in all of our schools. And so that's been helpful, especially at the elementary level, to teach the behavior of reporting things that you see on campus. One of the next section is probably related to the previous roundtable that we had right after the school shootings, when we talked about the safety of campuses. So I won't go into all the details except to point out that we do have policies and procedures that govern campus security. I mean, essentially, the principal is in charge of that site, and they're given very, very broad authority as to how they protect and provide security and safety for the students. We have talked to them, especially after that roundtable. We talked about the ensuring that we have people manning the exits and entrances to the campuses, just to be able to, even if that's not a very strong preventative measure, they're able to identify suspicious people on coming on campus, or at least do their due diligence in requiring that visitors make sure they go to the office, check in, and so forth. So that's something that we do, but I know we've been reinforced it recently because of the concerns that we raised here at the legislature about ensuring that we were vigilant, because we've recently required, this was voluntary early on, but we've required employee badges to be used, and so I'm signing off on many of those badges coming through. So there are about 4,000 employees, so we still have a little bit to go to be fully compliant. But again, some of the came out of the discussion we had here at the legislature. So we'll do that, but on the other hand, like I said, there's these preventative measures in light of what we were talking about in terms of school shootings, active shooter. They will be protective factors, but if somebody is really committed to doing something that egregious, it takes a much better partnership and with our law enforcement partners, and better ways to identify and try to prevent these actions and these incidents much earlier than when they're at the school campus. So we did talk about at that roundtable the law enforcement presence on campus. We talked about the school resource officers, some of the benefits and also some of the challenges in maintaining the full school resource officer program in light of funding constraints. And I believe I mentioned that we were looking at how we would move forward to expand the school resource officer program, potentially building around our school attendance officers, a core of school attendance officers that we have, and then working with GPD and exploring how we might leverage their reservist program. So that's something that's still being discussed and in the works. The SRO program, as it currently works with the judiciary and at that cost, we were really limited in being able to continue in the same way. So we really are trying to figure out what's the best way to move forward. And then we did talk about active shooter, and I think we explained before the response plans that are developed at the school site and the training and that goes along with it. So that is a continued area where I think we left the last roundtable with a commitment to force the law enforcement agencies to coordinate as well, because we work sometimes with the partners that are there, but we know that GPD and all the other law enforcement agencies need to be working in concert with us to really solidify our approach to and response. I'll touch on these other issues that were raised. In addition to the bullying, drugs, and weapons that were talked about in oversight, I did want to let you know that, of course, as we mentioned, we've updated our policies relative to sexual assault and harassment, as well as recognize that even issues like disrespect, defiance on campus, you might have seen in some of those videos, is not simply the bad actions of intoxication or bullying that you're seeing. There is also the struggle for school administrators to be able to handle students who seem out of control in those instances. So there's a lot of things that we track in addition to the most serious offenses relative to defiance and insubordination that we also pay attention to. We talked about the impact of social media and electronic devices on campus, and some of our administrators just before this hearing mentioned we ought to talk about at this point whether we should revisit our policies on the use of devices on campus. And I said that's fair to do. I mean, obviously the board in its policy-making role would probably benefit from an updated discussion on whether or not students should be allowed to bring phones onto campus and to use them on campus. So right now the board policy does allow for use on campus. It is really guided to be for instructional purposes. And as we move forward with integrating technology into our education, it seems like that's an appropriate way to move forward. But obviously it comes with consequences and challenges. I would just venture to say that even if we didn't have those devices on campus, we would still be dealing with the impact of technology, because outside the school, we know technology is prevalent. So most of the things, the cyberbullying issues that I come across are not necessarily happening at school. At school, they're face-to-face and they're within physical proximity, but the issues happen when people go home and they start texting or they start posting things on social media. So that's a challenge that I think in this particular world will be present as we go forward, whether or not devices are brought on campus. The other thing I mentioned is that sometimes for adults it's very difficult to interpret what that cyberbullying is. I mean, we have our definitions, we try to put a framework around it, but if you actually look at particular incidents that come across my desk, it happens where the administrator says, I'm reading what you're showing me, but I can't tell that it's cyberbullying, but the students know, right? Because it's not saying anybody's name, but the way the comments are, if you put it all into context, they're telling you. So there's a lot of work and things we need to explore in that range, but it is a significant issue, and I think it contributes to this issue of suicide and students who are really in distress, because it used to be, I think, that you could get bullied at school, but you get to go home to a safe place. Now you go home and you may not be safe from bullying, and in fact, it may be worse when you go home. So I would appreciate that, I'd love to continue that discussion and how we can improve. A couple more areas. We talked about staff responsibilities and training and screening. So I do want to, obviously the administrators behind me are the ones who are the ones in charge of monitoring staff and their whereabouts and so forth. So they are required to be accountable for that, understanding where staff are, when they're supposed to be working, when they're on break, when they enter and leave campus. They usually sign in when they get to campus and so forth. So that resides at the school level. Employees are supposed to be informing their school administrators when they do leave campus, and through a collaborative effort being able to account for everyone's time. And I know the question that was posed not because of what typically works, but because of an incident that we saw at Ubi Elementary when it seemed that there was a staff whose whereabouts were unaccounted for and led to an egregious incident. So we are looking at ways to improve that because, you know, again, I don't want that one person's action to color the work that all of our staff do, but in light of that incident, not just the whereabouts of the student, but the whereabouts of the employee are important. When it comes to students, they're not typically supposed to be left alone with a staff member. Many of our schools do that buddy system where their students are always supposed to be paired with another, and they're able to identify when a student might be missing, or together they're able to ensure that they're each other's safety. That's something that we're talking with our administrators in light of this recent incident. Now, the facts of this matter I won't go into at this hearing, but to say that, I would just say that, you know, Mr. Chairman, our board chair said the same thing, that 100% preventing these incidents on campus is really hard, high standard to meet. It's a standard that we shoot for, but you know, in this recent incident, it just reminds you that if somebody is ready and is committed to committing an act, a criminal act or an evil act, that person may be successful when they wait for the right opportunity and, you know, find a way to do what they're doing. Our job is to be able to know what to do when we are aware of that situation, who we should be calling, who we should be working with to address that situation. And you know what's really important, without going into the details of that situation, when we met with the parents, we went and we met face to face with the parents who were concerned, the whole community, the faculty and staff at the school. What was one of the bright spots is through the Lonnie Kate training, the curriculum that we've been working on with the Attorney General and that we've implemented in all of our schools, the fact that students feel comfortable reporting it to a teacher, to a counselor, and to a nurse, that's something that that's a protective factor that we need to realize, recognize, and encourage, because if it wasn't reported, if they didn't feel comfortable, if they didn't feel that they were supposed to report it, just because sometimes in some families or some outside the schools that may not be something they would do, we were very glad to have that happen. And we reminded our employees there, as well as throughout the school system, about good touch, bad touch, about the Lonnie Kate curriculum, and that's something that we're going to continue. What you should know, and I think you'll appreciate, is that out of that meeting, which was a very emotional and meeting, but parents, one of the things that they asked for was not, who do we blame and how do we, assess blame. It was, can we get Lonnie Kate training for parents, for us to be able to talk to our kids about things that you don't normally talk about or we talk about in code words and so forth. They asked that we do parent training. So there may be some good out of that, and I want to continue that. So I wanted to just say that for the good of this hearing. The next section and then the final section is really about the training and the screening. Our training and our screening of employees mirrors what's pretty much done throughout the government of Guam, where we do the background checks and do the drug screening and then annual TB. We're happy to look at that. I mean, it's something that we addressed and said, should we be doing more to screen applicants on an annual basis, not just when they come into the system? But of course, the problem is if they haven't, committed if this is the first time they committed an offense, you're not going to catch it through any criminal background check unless they've committed previous offenses. So in some of the recent cases that you've heard in the news, when we look at them, you see, well, should we have caught something? Clean records, even as we've checked and tried to identify any red flags. So it's not 100% foolproof, but we'll continue to discuss any ways to improve that. But you see a long list of the types of training. They're bulleted out. Our efforts are to continue to provide professional development and safety training to all of our staff, and we'll continue to refine and improve that support. But there is a robust set of training and supports that we provide to try to ensure that staff understand how to fulfill their responsibilities and support it in that effort. So I think, to wrap this up, I wanted to leave you with an overview of what I believe to be a very robust and detailed set of policies, procedures, trainings, and supports that are provided to assist our school administrators, faculty, and staff in protecting our students. And the reason why I want to say that is because nobody's operating blindly out at the schools. They're not operating as if, there's no guidance out there. Well, when something happens, unfortunately, when something happens, the only thing we can do is respond as quickly as possible and understand the level of due diligence and reporting and all the other things we can do to prevent these offenses from happening in the future, and to try to get a handle on the situation. If it's a student issue, we want to make sure those students get back on track, but ultimately we want to keep our campuses safe as well. So that balancing act, we try to continue to improve. So with all of that, I want to thank you for your continued support and partnership, and I'll be happy to answer any more detailed questions, since that was a lot we covered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. I would ask Senator July, you had some questions, because I know you need to leave soon.
I just wanted to thank you for that testimony. I think it's very thorough. It lays out all the policies, and that's what we want to know, what the policies are in place. I'm very happy to see a lot of principals here. I actually want you to name them all, because if I'm a parent, I would want to know that my principal was there, right? And I actually would love it if we had enough time to hear from them, because like you said, they are the ones on the front line. And so my question to them would be, and I would just invite you to maybe send in any testimony, or to your superintendent. So these are all the policies that are in place, but you are the ones that are out there with the students and the teachers, and maybe you can tell us, what do you think we should do to improve this, right? And I know that the board is also considering these things, but I just want to welcome you to please send those to us also, because I really do respect that you are the ones that have to deal with it, and you know the policy, yet you know the realities, right? And maybe there's something that you can suggest that would really help us get closer and quicker to the solutions. So, but thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Thank you for the board members that are here. I appreciate that you are very concerned about these things.
Yeah, can I make a quick comment? Senator, I really appreciate that, because, as we continue the dialogue, it was through that effort where you had us come through, and we've asked the superintendent to tighten up, especially the policy, or tighten up what comes in our gates. And so just the other day, when I went up to Simon Sanchez High School, they asked me for my ID. So it's working, and that's how we make the systematic change within the Department of Education. And I think, when we provide opportunities at the board level to have this real candid discussion on how to improve our policies, I think you see, the school community coming together and really addressing the issue, and not so much being adversarial and trying to solve the problems. But I do appreciate the legislature when they do engage with us when it comes to the safety of the kids. I see that, that is a major concern, and I can reassure you that we'll continue to operate in our role to ensure that the policies that are in existence, that the superintendent carries it out. And if we feel that there's gaps, or if there's legislation that we need to ask for your support, we'll definitely bring that forth to you folks. But I would like to drive policy from the level at which our employees are at, because I think, if anything, they would understand more importantly how to fix some of the challenges that they're facing. They become problem solvers. So thank you for that comment. I appreciate that.
If I could just add on to that, I want to thank you as well, because there's a reason they're here, is because there's two, that made me say two comments. One is when we were talking about active shooter, I tell everybody that our administrators are the front line. It's not me. It's not our deputies, or it's not nobody at central office. If somebody has to take care of these students, faculty and staff during an active shooter incident, it's our principals back here. And so that's why I want them, and I want to put that message out just like you did, that if we're going to improve the policies, we need to do it, but because they're the front line, so their input is very much needed. And then the second thing I want to say is that from that parent meeting we had at UPI this last week, one of the things that came out just really struck me, because I'm a parent, you've been a parent in the public schools. What's really key, especially when incidents happen that are really unfortunate and really tragic and terrible, and we all, very shocking. But what's really important is that they realize that what helps these schools run is that's the trust that you have for your teachers and for your administrators. And so my message to the community was, don't let this one bad apple color every relationship you have at school, because essentially what you do as a parent is that you rely on these administrators and the teachers to keep your kids safe, to care for your kid, to watch out for your kid. That's my philosophy as a parent of 2 kids. So whatever we need to do to make sure that they feel comfortable operating within these procedures and that they can be improved, that's something that we need to do because, again, like you realize it, you leave your child in the custody of these school administrators and teachers. You want to make sure that they're able to fulfill that responsibility that you already expect of them. So thank you for that comment.
Senator Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start off by thanking you, Mr. Chairman, for calling this oversight hearing, primarily because the topics that you cover have nothing to do with teaching and learning. They're about bullying and drugs and weapons and cyberbullying, and the superintendent turned in 8 pages front to back of everything the department does on all of these items that have nothing to do with teaching and learning. So it underscores the fact that so many of our DOE professionals are spending an inordinate amount of time doing things that have nothing to do with education necessarily. I mean, it helps to create a more conducive learning environment. It helps students to feel safer and therefore be able to learn better. But as far as the actual profession of teaching and learning, it's just a whole lot of stuff that our department is spending a lot of time doing. And so I wanted to thank you, Mr. Chairman, because I think that by highlighting this, it calls the attention to the community of something that needs to be addressed island-wide, not just within our department, but throughout our community. And so I also wanted to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing up all of these different incidences, because when we look at these incidences, we can start to see certain areas that we can perhaps, as a community, as a government, and as a department, begin concentrating on more to try and address these items. The first thing I wanted to highlight is that in all of these instances that you've mentioned, Mr. Chairman, there wasn't a single one in an elementary school. God bless. So our elementary school, so far, so good, and I think that has a lot to do with our kids being younger, parents being a little bit more involved at the elementary level, students adhering more to authority at that age. But as we got into the higher grades and the incidences that you listed, Mr. Chairman, of the 13 of them, only 2 were in middle schools. Arguably, they could be isolated incidences. The 11 of the 13 incidences were all in high schools. And this isn't an indictment on the high school management necessarily, but more so about the unique circumstances that high schools face. We're dealing with students who are encountering the process of entering into adulthood, students who are more likely to be rebellious, parents who are probably less engaged with their children because they're kind of letting them experience their own growing pains. And so I think that as a community, we need to turn our attention, not necessarily take from elementary and focus it on these others, but turn our attention to these key areas that you've identified, Mr. Chairman, and say, what can we do to fill the gaps in the high schools? Let's look at the high schools and say, how can we try and fill those gaps? And the first 2 things that come to my mind, I mean, the obvious one is school aids. I think we can definitely, all the schools can definitely afford more school aids. Well, not necessarily afford them, but they can definitely do with more school aids. And I think a second thing that perhaps we can start turning more attention to is our counseling department. I think getting our counselors to be perhaps less engaged in things like school schedules and figuring out what classes they're taking, and perhaps more engaged in calling them in and talking to them and saying, hey, how is everything going? Is there anything that you'd like to share with any challenges that you're facing? And perhaps from there it can become more of a network of solutions before they become problems. So I just wanted to raise those observations, Mr. Chairman. I think that this is a very good oversight hearing in the context of highlighting how much time and energy from the board all the way down to the school site is spent outside of teaching and learning on things like this. And then also highlighting where we need to start concentrating more resources on and perhaps evaluating different options to get there. And going into the budget season, I'm hoping that perhaps we can see in the department's budget maybe a request for solutions more centered around counseling and school aids and perhaps geared more towards the high schools. But we wouldn't know about these things unless this oversight hearing was called and unless all of this information was shared. So I'd like to thank everybody very much, and I'd like to thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for calling the hearing.
Thank you. Before you speak, Mark,
Yes,
relax,
sir.
okay? The Senator Nichols was right on the dot, talking about the budget. When we look at your budget, I've seen it for 6 years when I was on the board, and I see it now for the second year, and I'm like, I need you, John, to work with your staff, with Tulling, create a separate paper that identifies the high schools of how we want to be able to find funding for your school aides, for your counselors, for the areas you need to focus on. Then that's where we try to sit down with my colleagues and say, okay, separate this big budget, this $300 or $400 million budget, we can actually focus on trying to protect our children and help the school concentrate on education, not concentrating on all the stuff that's going on. And if you have any recommendation, Mr. Superintendent and the board, then let's address some of the issues that are out there. Maybe look at some of the codes, and I know Mr. Addis here, he's DOA, he's going to receive some of them, the ones that are giving these problems, but we need to work out on trying to prevent them from being repeated offenders and try to get them away from going to DOA. Let's get them back on track. Let's get them into wanting to learn. Because, you know, Dexter's over there like, I don't need to fill up his school. You know, he's got, what you got, a waiting list at JP Torres. We need to reduce that, where everybody wants to go to school. Everybody wants to feel safe in school. And that should be our focus, is making our school safe. And I understand where you're coming from, the 14 points mark with Senator Klitsky. When he did that, that was a dream sheet. I mean, that was a nightmare for the board when I was there. How do you put $1? You can't put $1. It's got to relate to your operation, which is in your budget. And maybe you might want to write your budget differently than to identify 0.1 is 10 million. No, write how it works into your budget. And when you identify your needs in reference to safety, try not to pad it too much, okay? Because we'll be watching. There's not a lot of money in the system, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, principals, we want to be able to help every high school. Every school we want to make sure is safe. Because when you identify that somebody's drunk coming into school, first thing I ask, thank God you got a new system. How did they get into the school? You know, and that will be our concern. And we want to make sure that, I know that I've met with the SROs, maybe just the aides, like Senator Sinclair said. We don't need to add more SROs. We got police reserves that want to be able to help the schools. The chief of police said he's willing to help. They just need to identify the funding. And there's a lot of police reserves that are actually aching to get in the schools and help, because it's their children, it's their grandkids, it's all family, and we want to be able to help you. Unless you have anything else you want to bring up, this kind of tells the people of Guam what's going on in DOE. You're doing everything you can.
Yeah. I do want to say, but let me go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, can I really quick?
We'll have the vice or you.
Yeah,
Which
I'll
one?
go first. Senator Nicholas, I really appreciate you pointing that out, because in this last year's budget, we did try to put in requests for more school aides. Of course, when it comes, I'm the chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, so when I first inherited that role, I kind of looked at how the data and all the dollar figures are put in. But I appreciate you advocating that, because that is actually one of the areas that I know Mr. Lujan, myself, and Ms. Gutierrez is a part of that committee, is the safety. So we will make sure that the budget highlights and details specifically those points, and we'll break it down into its finer points as to how it's going to really affect the safety of our kids. So I appreciate that, because this dialogue in terms of how you folks want to see the budget to help you better understand it, I think this would clearly give us an opportunity to show you folks that where those resources are going to be going. To also address the question of parent involvement, I actually had an opportunity, the superintendent and I met with the folks in Washington, D.C., and there was this parent section training seminar, and how do you get parents more engaged. When we look at our PTOs, we kind of look at them more of like fundraising, or how do we engage our parents. So we're going to look at reinstituting the Parent Congress and getting the leaders of our PTOs, and perhaps even providing some training, and then updating our list of support networks that are outside beyond the school, so that if there are parents that need that additional support in parenting, or if their child needs tutoring, or if they need counseling, what are the agencies out there that we can link them up to? So I do know that within the department they have a list, but in areas of prevention, of course, there's the primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention, right? And we try to catch them all along the way with interventions. And so very good points, senators, and rest assured our board members are here. We'll work with our superintendent. We have a board retreat coming up. Our board's focus for the past year has been on safety, curriculum, and our facilities. And so those 3 areas, we're going to be working with the superintendent through the summer to hash out our budget plan and to hash out our goals for the next couple of years. So I appreciate that comment, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Vice?
I've been waiting.
I could tell.
To answer your number 1 question, Chairman, we do have a board policy 406 on the cell phone. In fact, you were the chair when this was developed. There is an SOP that the superintendent, I guess, after finally, when the board policy was passed, that was in 2007, December. So it didn't. I guess the SOP was not developed until Mr. Fernandez came in 2013. But there is a SOP, and it describes what about cell phone in the classroom. So maybe there is a need for reinforcement of how these kids are doing. Using the cell phone in the classroom. And this is where all this video goes out there. But anyway, there is a board policy in place. Okay. As far as your question to number 2, the attendance. And, Senators, I will come here and testify in support, both of you, if you introduce a law to hold parents accountable on attendance. The school can do so much, but it's the parents. You have to hold the parents accountable. When there's a distribution of USDA commodities, they're all down there, even the kids. So the kids don't go to school. We have to hold the parents accountable because there's just so much we can do. There has to be harsh punishment because even shadowing their students at school, they send the younger one of the siblings. So it's time to hold the parents accountable, and it's time to put in a stiff penalty. The school cannot do it all. I've been around there. I stay up in Harmon. And during school days, I see kids, and I'll stop my car, and I said, "What are you doing? Aren't you going to school?" "No." "Where's your house?" "Over there." "What's the most popular apartment in Harmon?" Really. And so please, Senators, it's time. It's different from in the past, but now we need harsh punishment, penalty. And I hope that when they're brought in for, problem, that the judge too will be harsh in putting penalty to the parents. We cannot do it alone. The department, this administrators behind me can't do it alone. The school staff cannot do it alone. It's the parents. The parents have to be held accountable because all this problem that's happening, they're out on the road 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, middle school kids. It's like so what? They blame they don't blame the DOE. They said, because that kid was bullied at the bus stop. Are we going to, the principal, the school staff going to follow that kid all the way to the bus stop? They had a long day. So please, Senator San Nicolas and Senator San Agustin, introduce a bill to make a stiffer penalty and hold the parents accountable. I will be the first one here to testify in support.
You're referring to the compulsory age, right? You all understand that we have that bill, the 160, the compulsory age from 16 to 18. And I did identify there are something like 200 hours community service to the school. Maybe what I need to do, I'll send it to you, John, and then you take a look at it. And before it goes back onto the floor, maybe we'll amend it. We'll take a look at it. But who's your legislative committee? That's you? Oh, that's her? No. The reason why I'm asking is so that we can sit down and take a look at the Guam Code.
Right.
Because I know if you're talking about the curfew,
yes,
that we can talk to with Senator Talina Nelson.
Okay.
To ask GPD, can they pick up enforcement of the curfew law? Because there's a curfew law. It's just there's probably just not enough police officers out there, and we got to work with what they got.
And the attendance, really, because if, the kids, if the, parents was like, okay, he's got a stomachache. Oh, mom, I got a stomachache. So the attendance is a problem. So really, I know there is after 12 unexcused absence, right, referred, but it's habitual for some of the kids. And
just change your policy on attendance, and then we'll work with you on what we need to do to introduce the law. Okay, I know Senator Snickers and I are willing to work with this.
Introduce the bill to become a law. Because if it's just a board policy, you know what they do? They'll go to a senator and say, they're giving me a hard time at the school.
No,
please,
all I'm saying
make it a law.
Ms. Gutierrez, all I'm saying is that if you have a board policy and we need to put it in law, then we'll introduce a bill. That's not a problem. Introducing a bill is easy.
That's good.
It's making sure that it has some strength. Okay.
Because if it's a law, there's more teeth. Because I've got parents, they call me because my kids have so many attendance, but what absence or well, it's a board policy. Well, it's not a law. I said it doesn't matter. So make it a law, more teeth to it. Mas good.
Estambre, Marie.
So this year manggagini tati, mampus makatsetsunia. Senators. Sometimes I'm very hard. I'm one of the most hard board members to please, but I feel for them. I wish there was, during my time as a parent, I make sure my kid is inside the house before 10 o'clock, because I sure don't want to be arrested. If my child is getting out of control, if my son was getting out of control, I call the juvenile officers to come help me and talk to them. So right now we have to hold these parents accountable. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I just wanted to.
John,
I just wanted to thank you. Senator San Nicolas, thank you for those comments. Right along those same lines, I mean, my focus right now for this year, we're trying to look at federal grants to really focus on high school reform. We'll definitely try to address that, your concerns as part of that. And the other one is when you talk about counselors, what I said about school-based behavioral health and how we're leveraging our counselors to assist with that, that's definitely the direction we're trying to go, to be preventative as much as possible and to meet the behavioral and emotional needs of the students. So I want to thank you for making those priorities known, and we look forward to working with you through the budget. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in this public hearing room would like to speak? Dr. Ron, thank you for showing up. I was going to ask where you at, but please speak.
Okay. Thank you, Senator St. Augustine, and certainly thank you for all of our school officials and others who are here tonight. And particularly, I wanted to thank the superintendent and his wonderful administrators and staff who really do a lot of hard work at DOE. And it's certainly, it's something I'm much appreciative of. It makes, I think, our job as board members a lot easier to have a very professional staff and a very professional superintendent. I wanted to mention very quickly, Senator San Nicolas mentioned how important the school safety issue is for our school children. And it's absolutely right. But it's not only on Guam, it's everywhere in the United States. Everywhere in the United States, we're worried about these emerging issues, and it's something that's part of a national conversation. And our board, and certainly with Ms. Gutierrez, and certainly with our former chair, Mr. Atta, we've really linked up with these national conversations, and we're able to understand what are the best optimal policies, and we're certainly emerging with those. But I think that a few years ago, we did a study, my study with the students, and we asked parents, why do you send your kids to private school? And the number one reason, head and shoulders above everything else, was safety and bullying. Parents are keenly concerned about safety. They're keenly concerned about bullying. A partial answer to the reason we don't see this in elementary schools is in the mainland U.S., most lower level K through 6 violence happens from adults coming onto campus, not from the children themselves. And so we do have a stronger concern about keeping outsiders off of these elementary school campuses in general. But certainly, Senator St. Augustine, this hearing today is extremely important. The topic is very appropriate. The comments from Vice Speaker Terlaje and certainly Senator St. Nicolas were absolutely on point. And I think that these conversations should continue. And I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator St. Nicolas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a few closing statements. I very much understand the sentiment expressed by Madam Vice Chair. One of the things that, as a policymaker, seeing things from a very big picture in terms of the entire island, gives me a unique perspective. And while we definitely want as much parental involvement as possible, we also have a community that's in crisis. The cost of living keeps going up for our people. We have parents taking on longer hours, more jobs, or turning to more substance abuse because things are just getting harder. And that takes away from their ability to even become involved parents. And that just further underscores why this oversight hearing is so important, because we need to do, as a government and as an island and as a community, we need to do everything we can to make living here something that's viable. You know, you need to be able to afford living here. You need to be able to work and provide for your families, and to be able to come home at a decent time and help the kids with their homework and go to their parent-teacher conference without having to sign leave without pay or whatever. You know, I mean, there's just so many interwoven things that are choking the system. And in the end, the outcome, the place that it's starting to manifest, and we're seeing it at, is in the kids. You know, when I mentioned earlier that we don't have any elementary schools on this incident list, it's because parents, it's because parents, you know, all parents love their children. I think that they make an extra effort when they're younger, but as they get older, they tend to say, you know what, I'm going to let them take care of themselves. I'm going to go take on an extra shift. You know, and those are the kind of things that turn students out to, you know, kind of be on their own and have to figure things out for themselves, and that's when the trouble starts. So I'm fully in support of giving the department the tools that they need to be able to ensure that at these levels, the middle school, the high school level, we're going to be able to address the safety concerns. I definitely agree with you, Madam Vice Chair. We want as much parental involvement. At the same time, as we work on policy to try and contain the cost of living on this island, I think it's important for all of us to get involved in that conversation. You know, we can't just have the department coming down here and testifying that they need more money or that they're not getting the support they need. While at the same time we have these huge gaps on the front end, where the cost of living is rising, taxes are going up, people are having a harder time being good parents because they're too busy trying to just make ends meet. We need to all as a community come together on these kind of shared policies that overlap. And I think the Department of Education, you know, it's that one agency where we can turn things around. A child that's born into a home that does not have as much resources can get the education they need to raise their children in a home that's different. And so we definitely need to support DOE in that mission. And we also need to support our communities and our families to make them be as involved as possible, not only by encouraging them to be involved, but by also pursuing policies that are going to help them have the quality of life necessary to be good parents. I don't think there's probably a very small amount of people out there who don't want to be good parents. I think almost everyone wants to be a good parent. And we just need to find ways to help them do that. And I'm counting on the Department of Education to help us spread that message. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Being that there's nobody else wants to speak, right? Great. The committee, this will conclude the oversight hearing. Thank you, John, and the board members and all the principals. The committee will continue to receive testimony. If any of you principals want to submit testimonies on how we can assist you, please feel free to submit it. Send it to the Committee on Education. Submit it via email, Senator Joe S. San Agustin @gmail.com. And my office located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 Marine Corps Drive, Tamuning, Guam. Sidzus Masi for your attendance and participating for today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching.